Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm Pat Floyd, Chairman and CEO of the MTA. I'm joined by my colleagues, Ronnie Hakem and Andy, Managing Director of the MTA, Andy Byford, President of New York City Transit, Sally LeBrebre, Head of Subways, and Mr. Melvin Wright, who's a 32-year operator. We're here today to discuss March 2019 subway performance statistics, which once again improved significantly and continue to improve month after month after month. Last month, we achieved the lowest number of weekday delays in 5 years. Andy will discuss the details and the import of that in a moment, but I want to touch briefly on their significance in light of my recent appointment to serve as Chairman and CEO of the MTA. These performance results are yet another reminder that investment in our transit system, along with smart operations by dedicated, hardworking professionals, some of whom are with us today, yield real, tangible results. Put simply, investment in transit works. These results are also an assurance that additional funding we'll be getting through central business tolling, district tolling money will be well spent. Thanks to this year's state budget, the MTA's upcoming 2020 capital plan went from $0 a couple of weeks ago to $32 billion overnight. Central business district tolling, along with the real estate transfer tax and the internet sales tax, and a continuing commitment from the federal government, can and will serve as the foundation for a robust MTA capital program. It's hard to overstate the significance of this development to the MTA, to our environment, to the people, to the economy, to our very way of life. And Governor Cuomo deserves tremendous credit for this extraordinary achievement. I thank two legislative leaders, Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins and Speaker Carl Hastie. Before I turn the floor over to Ronnie, I want to be very clear about something. Central Business District tolling is not only an incredible opportunity for the MTA, it's also a huge responsibility for this organization, and I intend for us to live up to this responsibility. Now that we're being entrusted with these revenues, we must be more accountable and more transparent than ever. To start with, we're revamping our FOIL and open data processes, and we'll have more about this in the weeks to come. We'll also begin the critically important work of fundamentally reforming the MTA as mandated in the state budget. Towards that end, we will soon be delivering a personnel and reorganization plan to the board, undergoing an independent forensic audit and efficiency review, which will subsequently be made public and before that shared with our board, and requiring any MTA capital project over $25 million to use the design, build, delivery method, along with many other reform measures. Now more than ever, the MTA must deliver. Now more than ever, we must continue to improve service, reform the organization, rebuild credibility, and increase accountability and transparency. In the coming months and years, we'll be working nonstop to rebuild and gain the trust of our customers, elected officials, the MTA board, and other stakeholders. Ronnie.
Thanks, Pat, and good afternoon, everyone. So this is an exciting time to be part of the MTA, and it's an exciting time for our region. As Pat just said, Central Business District tolling is a reality, and why is that important to us? If you care about reducing traffic congestion, if you care about our environment, if you care about air quality and improving air quality in the region, and if you care about improving the transit network and the transit system that millions rely on every day, then you can agree with us that it is a great time to be a New Yorker. The results of the Subway Action Plan and New York City Transit's Safe Seconds Plan and President Byford's Back to Basics approach have delivered, and they're continuing to pay dividends across the system. So the takeaway on this is clear. If we invest in our transit system, we can see sustained improvements month over month, year over year. These improvements are real and they are growing. Now, Central Business District tolling is the single most important step for our region that can help us build on these improvements for the future. And that's why we're showing our system's potential today. It demonstrates an investment in transit ends up with improvements in service. We're showing that giving us a huge capital boost will only drive performance up even further. And in a moment, Andy will be reporting more on the great subway performance and the numbers for the month of March, and I'm proud of him and his team and all the folks you see here today who deliver on these services. But remember, we continue to expect numbers to fluctuate, but what we're looking for are trends. And what we're seeing month after month now is that the trends are going in the right direction. And as Andy's going to describe in a moment, that's the case with every meaningful subway metric that we have. We report on them very openly every month. And when they're good, we want to talk about them. When they're bad, we want to talk about them. We're very clear on that. We now have the team in place to improve our system. We have a plan in place to improve our system. And now, with congestion, with central business district tolling, we have the foundational funding we need to fully modernize the system. No doubt we have a long way to go. We're not declaring victory, but we're clearly moving forward. So I'll pass it to Andy to discuss the specific improvements that he and his team are working so hard to achieve. Andy.
Thank you. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Ronnie. Thank you, Pat. Soon after I came on board, we set a very ambitious target. I remember doing that at the board to every month achieve 10,000 fewer subway delays than the 80,000 per month that I inherited, 80,000 delay incidents per month. And I said we must be able to do better than that. We need to do at least 10,000 fewer per month. I knew we could hit that target, and we have for 7 consecutive months now. So based upon this success, last month I announced that we will increase that target, stretch that target to a reduction of 18,000 delay incidents per month. And we've now done that as well. So I would just like to acknowledge again Sally Librera, who's our SVP for Subways, and it's Sally and her team that have led that huge improvement in subway service. So let's talk about some specifics. Weekday delays in March were 37,667. Now, clearly, that's 37,000 too many, but that is a huge reduction from that 80,000 that were pretty much the norm not very long ago, just over a year ago. That in itself is a reduction of 40% from March 2018, and the lowest monthly total since 2014. Weekday on-time performance last month was just over 78%. That's a significant increase from about 65% in March of 2018, and the highest on-time performance since November 2013. We recorded 50 major weekday incidents last month, and that itself is down 41% from 84 in March of 2018. We look at other customer metrics as well. Customer focus metrics, including service delivered, additional platform time, additional train time, and customer journey time performance, all trended higher last month, which is the right direction, all trended higher last month than March 2018, and higher than their 12-month averages. And most notably, additional train time, which is the average additional and unanticipated time that customers spend on board the train service due to service issues, dropped 27% from March of last year, and customer journey time performance, in other words, the overall journey time that the customer takes on a journey, for March was 82%, which is an increase of 3.6% from last March. Now, the good news is that it's not just statistics we look at, we talk to customers as well. And our customers are noticing, and I'd like to acknowledge over there Sarah Meyer, who is our Chief Customer Officer. So at the end of the day, I can quote all the stats I like, but it means nothing if the customers aren't noticing. And the good news is that they are. Overall satisfaction, service satisfaction, increased by more than 6 percentage points to more than 61% this quarter. Now, one more important point before we open this up for questions. All of these improvements that we're seeing today are a direct result of the truly extraordinary work of our transit workers and managers, some of whom are here with us today. So I'm really proud to have my colleagues with me here today because these are the people that deliver these impressive statistics. So bear with me just while I do a few introductions. We have people from across the company, from service delivery. We have one of our line superintendents. We have train service supervisors. We have platform controllers looking very smart here in their blue uniforms. The number one line, let's just take this as an example. One line has consistently exceeded delay elimination targets and has a dedicated team working across divisions to move trains safely and quickly. So good job to the number one line. From stations, we have one of our 22 group station managers, GSM Sazama Joseph. We have a supervisor and we have a cleaner. Station teams have been integral to maintaining our stations and ensuring cleanliness, along with providing accurate customer information to get customers where they need to go. From our car equipment division, we have an emergency response team member and one emergency supervisor. Car equipment emergency teams have been strategically placed so that we can more quickly respond to incidents to ensure that cars are repaired as quickly and safely as possible. And from our maintenance of way team, we have track teams and signal inspectors who have been focused on regular inspections and preventative maintenance to ensure that signals are operating efficiently and that we keep our trains moving. So I'm very proud of you, ladies and gentlemen, my colleagues at New York City Transit. You are the ones that are out there in the system working day and night to implement our Save Seconds campaign created last year to safely reduce travel time for customers using our subway. Let me give you some examples. In fact, it was train crews and managers that helped us to identify signal timers that were wrongly calibrated. As a team, we have identified and lifted redundant speed restrictions that were no longer necessary. Our train operators, conductors, and platform controllers are working together to safely minimize station dwell times, to keep service moving, and to safely speed up journey times. And as I mentioned, our station cleaning teams, led by our new group station managers, are delivering cleaner, brighter, more welcoming stations. So this truly is a team effort. Now, as a 30-year railwayman, I've been in this job a long time, in this business. I knew that we had to get our operational basics right, and under Sally Labrera and the team, it's working. Our teams are working non-stop under the Subway Action Plan to install literally miles of new, more reliable track and to repair thousands of signals and track defects. They're making our subway system more reliable, more resilient, more transparent, and more accountable. Their work is getting us back on track. That progress is not going to stop, and again, I am extremely proud of them. Now, that said, we know we've got a long way to go, and that progress is not going to stop, and we need to bring the subway up to a much better baseline from which to truly modernize the system. So we're working to squeeze every possible ounce of performance out of the existing system, and I know that we can do better still. I've set my team a target to move up beyond 80% of on-time performance on the existing system. But the funds, as the chairman said, the funds provided or promised by the central business tolling and our fast forward plan are the two things, the funding and the plan together. They will ultimately allow us to deliver the service that New Yorkers need and deserve. So now, before we go to questions, I'd just like to turn the floor over to my colleague who Pat introduced earlier, standing behind me, Melvin Wright, a train operator of 32 years experience, and he exemplifies the professionalism and passion of transit workers. He's one of thousands of frontline workers who is out there every day delivering Save Seconds, working on the Subway Action Plan, and working on our back to basics approach to literally make things better for our customers every day. Melvin, it's my pleasure to introduce you.
Good afternoon. Hi. Well, I can speak from my personal experience of what I see on a daily basis out there. Do see the track workers out. Do see switches being replaced, signal systems being replaced. We have what's called general orders. That's when all the work come together and everybody in the subway system is alerted to the work that's going to be in progress during the set hours. We do have train crews, conductor, train operator. We work as a team. They've added another component, which is the platform personnel, who now assist the conductor in getting those doors closed with even less delays. And as a train operator, I'm prepared as soon as my indication comes in to move out of the station safely and in adequate time without further delays. Those are just among some of the things I see. I see clean the subway tracks, of course. I can't recall a track fire in some time, something that was prevalent in the past.
What about Mr. Wright, what about trash bins?
Trash bins, yeah, the trash bins are being utilized. Amongst those things, we have other things that we do too. When a train's being put into service from the yard to the station, we now put an extra train operator on board that pulls it into the station while the train operator who's actually going to be in service is on the opposite end, that expedites the move. And normally it would be the train operator on this end will have to pull it himself, walk 10 car lanes, 600 feet platform, start the train up again, and then move out. That's been eliminated. Having what's known as switchmen. Switchmen are a trainer come in the station. The train operator has to pull it into the back so you can pull the train back to the opposite side. And as a result, we put someone on the opposite side, and that also reduces the time from a train operator walking 600 feet, and that saves a huge amount of minutes. Really a lot of time. Some train operators might walk a little slower, some are quick, but that eliminates that, saving us at least 4 or 5 minutes additionally.
Thank you, sir. Good.
So I'm going to ask, I don't want to ask all these folks to stay up here while we do independent questions, so I'm going to ask everyone to just step aside.
Thank you for coming. Thanks. Mr. Wright, pleasure to meet you. Good, thanks a lot. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, thanks for coming. Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Good. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Good. Please.
Can you speak to earlier today? I know this is just anecdotally, but going down to the Fulton Street station, we talked to probably 7 or 8 subway riders, and
Scientific survey.
I know. I admit, not scientific
Yeah.
at all, but all of them, virtually all of them, would say, "I don't believe it." What do you tell the people who just don't believe that you're saying basically 80% of trainings are on time?
Let me answer that for a second. I'm going to turn it over to Andy. Look, our customers aren't satisfied. We aren't either. We're not reporting that the job's been completed. Far from it. The congestion pricing plan, I think, is the Central Business District tolling program, but more importantly, a fully funded MTA capital plan, including 80% of that capital for subways and buses, extraordinarily important. So the customers you talk to are right. We do samplings. Andy talked about the results. Customers, and Mr. Wright sees it every day in his job. Service is getting better. The increase from 65% to nearly 78, almost 80. That's a 20% increase in on-time performance, and what we're giving New Yorkers back is time, and that's the most valuable resource. Do you want to chat for a minute?
Sure. I mean, so look, the way I'd answer that is, at the end of the day, the stats don't lie. The stats are what they are. But I do get that and it's not unique to New York. You get it the same in Sydney, same in Toronto, same in London. There's always a lag between service improving and the statistics showing that they've improved, and people acknowledging and believing that they've improved. So that's point number one. Point number two, we do, as the chairman said, we do objective surveys. We go out and ask people. We get them to score their journeys, and we get them to talk about do they feel that things have improved across a range of measures compared to the same period last year, for example. And that's what Sarah and her team do. And again, that's showing an increase. Third thing for me, don't forget, this is still the existing system. We haven't yet done all the work of Fast Forward. We haven't upgraded the signaling system, although we have just done that on the 7 line, and maybe I'll come back to that. But there's a lot of work going on out there. So the reality and the experience, because we're doing so much work on what is, don't forget, a 24/7 system, which isn't easy. A lot of places have the luxury of shutting overnight. Yes, there is still some disruption while we get that work done. And fourthly, I apply my own filter, because I ride the service every day. Today I came in on the 103 bus, the M103 from Midtown. I go and ask customers, what do you think? Or they come up and tell me unsolicited. And I'm noticing increasingly people are saying it's definitely getting better. But as the chairman said, we're not satisfied with that. And I am going to keep pushing the boundary and squeeze the most out of this existing system before we get on with what will be the most transformative thing, which is all-out re-signaling and the myriad other things that Fast Forward will bring.
Please.
Pat, you pointed out that one of your major pushes is transparency, but the big project coming up in the L train seems to be anything but transparent. We still don't know a construction timeline for it as to when it's going to be complete, and the hundreds of thousands of riders still don't have the mitigation plan or the alternate service plan, and they have less than 3 weeks to prepare for a life-changing transit project. So what would you say to that towards what are you doing to make that process more transparent? And do you have a construction timeline for the L train?
Well, look, I disagree with the premise that it hasn't been transparent. Let me ask Ronnie to speak to it, and then I'll come back.
Sure. And I think we saw each other last night or the night before at the town hall. So we've been doing a lot of public outreach. We actually have been distributing brochures that is the alternate service plan. It explains the additional subway service that we're providing on the G, the M, the number 7, the J, the connections that we're doing with creating a new Williamsburg Link shuttle service to bring people from the Bedford area or Metropolitan Lorimer down to Marcy Avenue to get the M. We're encouraging people to take alternate subway service. Subways will continue to be the fastest way to travel. When we are doing the L project, the great thing is that Monday through Friday, for the 275,000 people that use the L to go to work, to go to school, to go to doctor's appointments, we'll continue to have that full service available to them. Nights and weekends, we will be curtailing the service. We've been talking about 20-minute headways. That's why we're saying go to a different subway line. Take the Williamsburg Link. Take advantage of that. If you're in Manhattan, look at the subway map, and we've been telling people at these town halls and at community board meetings how to use the subway system differently. So the whole point is to give people choices. That is the beauty of the New York City subway system, which is that it's very redundant. There are lots of intersecting lines, and we're encouraging people to do that. And I'll agree with Pat. I think we've been very transparent about this.
Yeah, I would just add the following. I think there were New Yorkers who are going to be at cocktail parties this weekend or at barbecues, weather depending, and they're going to be discussing bench wall. And there are going to be other people at PTA meetings or watching their kids in the playground discussing FRP. The whole thing dating back, and I think Andrew Sif and perhaps Marcia were in the tunnel that night. The governor brought the deans in early December, if I'm not mistaken. That was done in public. The presentation by the deans January 3rd was done in public. As Ronnie mentions, there's been an extraordinary amount of community meetings both before and after the new plan was launched. They continue, including this week. We'll be reporting and discussing with the board and the public where we are in the contracts, where we are on the schedule, where we are on the alternative service plan. And the last thing I'll say is the fact that New Yorkers are familiar with the term bench wall and FRP is a consequence of the extraordinary focus that this transaction has gotten. The MTA board, and this is not a criticism, it's an observation, right? When the MTA board went and approved this project, approved the construction contract for X hundreds of millions of dollars, there was no discussion about the means and methods. I think the governor's right that there was a collective failure of imagination a number of years ago. And I believe that this has been a transparent project, and the project that has resulted is superior from the point of view of 200,000 customers, from public safety, and from getting this done in an efficient manner.
Sorry, Pat, do you have a timeline for the project?
We don't want to step on our lead, and you got to come to the meeting next week. Andrew.
Back to the skepticism that some riders indicated about this improvement. Is some possibility here that you're getting your improvement out of one or two lines? Is this definitively across the board? Is it possible that some of the customers are on lines that have not seen this?
No, so you'll see the board pack. You may already have it. So there's been a general improvement across the lines. But what is stunning, actually, is some lines really are improving, and not by chance. Let me cite the 7 line. I said I'll come back to that. The 7 line, where we have now installed communications-based train control, CBTC, end-to-end, has jumped 35%. A month over month, and I expect that to continue. And we haven't even yet turned on what's called automatic train operation. We've got a couple more things to do. We'll be doing that in early May. So that is an outlier, if you like. That's particularly extreme, but that shows the power of new signaling. That shows the power of investment. That shows what you can do with modern technology. But even on those lines that haven't yet benefited from that, we have seen improvements across the whole of the subway. Now, some more than others. And there are some lines that are more difficult to fix than others, and we've still got some work to do on merges and getting the schedules right. But every line is equally important to me, and my mandate really to my operations team, my subway team, is to address what are the root causes, both generic across the system and on a line-by-line basis. And one by one, we're going to relentlessly design those out and iron them out.
Yeah, Andrew, the other thing I'd say is for the statisticians in the room, a 40% decline in weekday major incidents or a 20% increase in on-time performance from March of 2018 to March of 2019 that could not be derived from an improvement on one or two lines. As Andy mentioned, the details will be in the board book, but it's across the entire system, and obviously there are fluctuations.
Yeah, so thank you. Sorry, thank you, Shams. I should have had this with me. I won't read them all out. You'll have them in the board book, right? But what we call subdivision A, which are the numbered lines, overall plus 20.5%. And for the lettered line, subdivision A, plus 7%, giving a system-wide overall improvement of plus 13. And looking down this list, they're pretty much all pluses. There's one that we need to have a look at, which is the M line, but generally all heading in the right direction. Why? Because we have this relentless focus on basics, and we've got the benefit of the subway action plan now really bearing fruit.
As a quick follow-up to that, from your own numbers, the lettered lines are a lot less known.
Well, the lettered lines have a particular challenge in that the RCC, the Rail Control Centre, cannot see those lines. They are controlled by individual signalling towers, but we're doing something about that. We are bringing forward the means by which we can illuminate a diagram, a signal diagram, such that the Rail Control Centre, who have the overview, will be able to see those lines in the same way via what's called ATS, which is automatic train supervision, in the same way that they have done for a long time on the numbered lines. That was going to take quite a long time. We found a way of expediting that, and we'll have further news from you on that as soon as we've done it, but it will be imminently.
Marcia.
I have two questions. The first is that when I talked to various drivers today and talked about the improvement, what they talk about is the overcrowding on the trains. And one man said it's like Japan, you need to have somebody to sort of push people on some of the trains. So my question to you is that given the fact that overcrowding seems to still be a fact of life until you can run more trains, what can people expect when you do congestion pricing when arguably more people will be on the train? What can they expect in January 2021 when congestion pricing starts in terms of overcrowding?
Do you want to talk about the impact on the 7 and the increase in throughput?
So the key thing for me is, well, two things. Number one, we need to push on with re-signaling because that's what will give us more reliability, but will also give us more capacity, because modern signaling, as I've said to you before, enables trains to move up safely closer together such that you can move more trains. But even before that, and that's what Save Seconds is all about, getting your basics right, you must get the service running smoothly so that you have trains running frequently and keep them evenly spaced. If you have a big gap between trains, that's when the crowds really build up, and the train, the head of the queue it's a bit like buses, whichever one gets to the stop first is really crowded, so we've got to space those. To your point about congestion pricing, we are modelling already, we're doing modelling on what we think the impact will be on the tolling, both in terms of use of car parks, migration to buses, migration to subways. We are modelling that, and not just for the subway, actually, we're also modelling it for the railroads to make sure that this doesn't catch us unawares, that we figured out pretty much where people will go, given that the alternative is they'd have to pay a fee. Well, I mean, look, in the peak, in a peak time, and people sometimes ask me on the train, people say to me, "This is ridiculous. Look how crowded this train is." Well, it's the peak. If you've been to London on the Central Line at 7 a.m., it's crowded. Go to Tokyo, been there, done that, and again, it's crowded. But progressively, as we add more service, which we will, as we bring in new rolling stock, but also as we re-signal lines, that's how we mitigate that. Let me take, again, the 7 line as an example. We currently run 27 trains per hour, although in reality, at times it's 25 trains per hour. In the beginning of May, now that we've got the new signalling system in, and with one more piece of work to do on a switch at Willets Point, we're going to go up to 29 trains per hour. That is a material increase. With the L line, once we get that project finished, that we currently run something like 22 trains per hour, we will be able to increase the service because we're also adding substations, therefore power, we can run more trains. So progressively, by upgrading the system, we will run more trains, and that will help mitigate any migration, which we welcome, by the way, of people getting off their cars and onto public transit.
Please. That's 3, Marcia. I'm using the term legislature used. Who am I to? Please.
If I could touch back on the L
Sure. So the We're Not Ghosting You campaign is one of many. They're bright pink car cards, bright pink posters, L logo. You're starting to see them. You're going to see a lot more. They've got many different messages on them. Nobody's trying to downplay what we know is going to be an impactful issue on those late nights and weekends. We are absolutely wanting to tell our customers this is going to be a challenge. That's why we have done the homework that we've done to put more subway service in place, encourage people to familiarize themselves with what the alternate services are, use that Williamsburg link if it is helpful for you, and we will be monitoring very carefully each of the stations along the L and the related stations as part of the alternate service plan. And he's going to have folks flooding the system, we'll all be out there, to make sure that if we need to make tweaks to the system, the alternate service plans will be able to do that.
If I could just follow up on that. This morning there was something of a protest from the union at Bedford Ave, saying this plan is unvetted, the air quality has not been looked at all, and Mr. Byford obviously said he wanted to do an independent vetting of this before it even started. That doesn't seem to be happening. How would you respond to that protest?
So I saw the flyer that they put out. That was a fringe group from the union. The TWU put out their own statement from the president of the union that was saying this will be safe, this is safe, good for our employees, good for our riders. It's ludicrous to think that we would do anything to put our employees or our customers at risk. That was irresponsible and frankly kind of dangerous pandering from the protest this morning.
Dana.
So, as reporters, we seem to be getting two different messages. On the one hand, from the governor's office, he's getting the message that the MTA is in a state of emergency and completely incompetent. And then from you guys, we're getting this good news story about how the subway system's doing so much better and MTA workers should be proud of themselves. How is one to sort of?
I don't think the governor's, I don't think there's anything to parse here. At the Abney speech last week, the governor had a slide. He didn't have the March data because we hadn't released it yet, about the effects of the subway, positive effects of the subway action plan and Save Seconds, which reported through February then the results. The governor also said the MTA needs to reform. We agree. The MTA needs to be restructured. We agree. The MTA needs to be more efficient. We completely agree. We're not happy. Our customers aren't happy. Elected officials aren't happy, from the governor to the majority leader to the assembly. I don't think there's any light between our positions at all.
Why then, what about the difference between every month touting these new, more impressive numbers while the governor is still maintaining a state of emergency as necessary?
But Dana, your position would put these under a bushel and not allow. We're not going to do that. These are happy numbers. That's good news. If at some point we've got a disappointment to report, we're going to report it. We'll appear before you there as well. But we're not happy with the results. There's a great deal of work to do. Andy has described his ambitions in terms of on-time performance with the current system and what he and his team, including some of the people who are here today, will be able to do when the fully funded MTA capital plan goes into effect and those funds begin to be deployed. It's quite exciting. Yes, sir.
Chairman Foy, if I could address President Byford.
Sure.
Governor Cuomo, I believe in the Abney speech, talked about UWS.
UWB.
I'm sorry, UWB.
That's okay.
As opposed to CBTC.
Mm-hmm.
To sort of wrap my head, and I guess collectively our heads, the 7 and the L have been installed with CBTC.
Correct.
Now, is there a plan for other lines to be using that technology, or are you going to hold off and use the other technology?
No, it's not either or. CBTC is a proven, mature methodology that has been used around the world on leading transit systems. So right now, or in recent years, and it's still ongoing, the likes of Hong Kong, London, Paris, world-leading authorities, transit systems, well-regarded transit systems, are actively installing CBTC, communications-based train control. So what that is, it's a full train control system. It enables you, as I said earlier, to move trains safely closer together. It's highly reliable. There's way less line-side equipment than there is on a conventional fixed block signaling system. And it also enables you to have automatic train operation. You know where the trains are. It's a very flexible system, actually. However, the one downside of it is it does require still quite a lot of equipment to be put into the tunnels and to be fitted to the trains. So that adds cost, it adds time, and it is more intrusive, because what it means is that you've got to have weekend closures in order to get that work done. And there is more to do. So we are in parallel exploring what's called ultra-wideband, which is in itself not a signaling system, but it's, if you like, the communications part of CBTC. And I think it's in tandem together. Those two systems will be a world beater. So in terms of what we're doing at the moment, as you said, 2 lines already have CBTC. We're already working on it. It's happening at the moment, putting CBTC onto the Queens Boulevard line. We've let a contract for Culver, and we're working on 8th Avenue with slightly different technology, what are called axle counters at the moment. But in parallel, we're developing UWB. So if UWB proves to be safe, and we're doing a passive trial in the fall on 2 of the lines, then we could potentially install CBTC in combination with UWB quicker, more cheaply, less intrusively, and that would be a massive leap forward. So I take my signaling advice from Pete Tomlin, who's the guy that I brought in, world expert on signaling, and he already is very excited by what he sees as UWB. But as the governor and I both agree, it makes sense in the meantime to push on with CBTC while we prove the case for ultra-wideband.
Please.
Just to clarify regarding the L train tunnel contract, did you say it's not finished yet, or you're not going to release the finished information yet to us?
We're going to discuss it next week. We told the board and the public that we expected the contracts would come in below the original amounts, and stay tuned next week. Yes, please.
Back to the L train with air quality control. What stations are there air control tested, and how can you release that to the public to ease the public's concern that they may have over what this group is calling cancerous?
So there are air monitors at Bedford, there are air monitors in the tunnel, there are air monitors at First Avenue. I'll get the full list, and we'll make the full list of where the other air monitoring locations are. We're working right now, actually, with the L team and the environmental consultants to figure out how to best post weekly information. We think weekly updates is the right way to go on air quality, and obviously we'll, as we said before, do everything in an environmentally prudent and safe way, and we'll test along the way.
So let me add one fact that we'll talk about next week, which is the amount of demolition of bench wall. Originally was 100%. That was the plan on the original proposal. The Columbia Dean suggested it could be reduced by about 40%, more or less. What we'll be discussing next week is a reduction of 99%. So we will have gone from 100% to approximately 1. This is demolition of bench wall, the term that everybody in New York is talking about. There couldn't be any clearer proof that the Columbia and Cornell deans and their professors provided an incredible public service. And in their defense, I'll say, not only did they suggest it could be reduced to 40 or 50%, they said in the report that there was a possibility for substantial further reductions. We have taken them up on that offer. Obviously, one of the happy consequences of that is a significant reduction in the amount of dust and silica. The measures that Ronnie Haycom just described will remain in place. And you can imagine that the decrease in the demolition of bench wall from 100 to 60 to now 1% will have salutary benefits on cost and schedule. Yes, sir.
As these trends continue, could we expect to see maybe less work on the lines that are showing improvement, and maybe more work on more service delays, or night work on the lines that need?
Well, Greg, there's still a lot to do. Is the bottom line. I mean, we still have a lot to do in terms of upgrading what is, at the end of the day, in some cases, 100-year-old infrastructure. So we may see a reduction on some lines, but other lines there's still switches to be replaced. There's track work to be done. You know, and again, in many ways, this is certainly the most challenging place I've ever worked, because there's this much cherished desire to run service 24/7. I think it's fantastic, but it does mean that it's more of a challenge in terms of getting in. But progressively, and as we roll out Fast Forward under the capital plan, progressively as we modernize this system and we end up with new signaling that has less line-side equipment, progressively as we renew track and drainage and pumps and HVAC and all the various other stuff that needs to run a modern system, then there will be less work that needs to be done. Now, the other thing I would say is that we're paying very close attention to making sure that we don't go over the tipping point between getting the work done that people want us to do because they want better service and making weekend service intolerable. So we're really paying some close attention to that. Sarah and I have been doing some work with Sally to look at what goes on the weekend to make sure that we are getting that balance right and that you can still get around from A to B while we finish the job off.
All right, last question.
Michael Aronson.
You keep citing the value of the Dean's contribution to the L train. Now you got 1% demolition. Cuomo
To be clear, of Benchwell.
Benchwell.
Yep.
What everyone's talking about. Cuomo in his advocacy speech says he wants the same type of second look, independent look at East Side access. $11 billion in running. How is that going to work? Are you going to bring in academics? What's the timeline on that? Is Jan Lieber going to do it? How is that going to work on the second look at East Side access?
So, Michael, good question. Here's what I'd say. Even if it weren't required by the statute, given that result and that contribution to the public commonweal, we'd be crazy not to ask people like the Columbia and Cornell deans and professors. The statute in particular, first, Jano will be in charge and remain in charge of MTA capital construction. Without stealing his thunder, he's going to be reporting, he and his colleagues are going to be reporting to CPOC next week. The results and the conclusions are going to be positive. Some are going to be inspiring. I'm going to get to chair that committee for the first time, and I'm really looking forward to it. The statute requires that we get input from internal and external academic, business, and frankly, I'll use the term disruptors. And the contribution that the Columbia and Cornell deans and their colleagues made to the L train, I think is extraordinary. And of course, we're going to apply it to other projects. The governor and the legislature were requiring us to apply it to East Side access. Some have questioned that, and I'll just note the following. The East Side access capital construction still to be done is north of $1 billion, which is far in excess of the L train project, where that approach provided significant value in terms of schedule, in terms of cost, in terms of significant reduction in dust, and lastly, avoiding disrupting the lives of 200,000 people. So, of course, we're going to apply that approach more broadly. Thanks, everybody.
Just a question on the, you talked about responsibility. I wanted to ask about, being responsible with congestion pricing money. You have work like building elevators, making stations accessible. You got the Second Avenue subway. What reforms can you talk about, put in place so that the Second Avenue subway doesn't bust the budget, putting in the elevator in the station doesn't bust the budget, and will you be using those academic teams for this phase 2 of Second Avenue?
So, Dan, here's the way I'm going to answer that question. I could talk about the reforms, and we'll talk about that more on Wednesday, but here's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to report that on second track, it came in 14 months early. I'll report that new fare payment, which we're rolling out on the Lexington Avenue line and Staten Island. And in this very room this morning, Al Petray, who's the project leader, who I think is not only a transit legend, but an incredible manager and motivator here, reported that the project continues to be on time and on budget. I think if you go to the CPOC meeting on Wednesday, you're going to hear Jano Lieber and his colleagues report on Penn Station access, East Side access, Second Avenue subway phase 2, where I think there's actually an inspiring story. We need a ton of federal money, and we're going to mention that. So rather than talking about reforms and give you words, I've just given you a bunch of examples. The lessons of the L train and reaching out to independent experts is something that not only the statute's going to require, and we're going to do it, of course, but the MTA is going to be reaching out to experts outside the MTA, including disruptors, including academics, including business people, and we're really excited to do that. Look, the real news here is that Andy and Sally and the men and women behind them today, including Melvin Wright, have delivered these numbers. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.